Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good, good. So I am Latanya Martin with Grand Style Homes, and this is Buying and Selling Nashville. Today I'm here with Matt Helton with One Trust Home Loans, and we're talking about divorce today. Um, has anyone went through a divorce? Are you going through a divorce? Are you separated but still married? Do you own property? Are you trying to buy a property? Do you want to sell a property? What do you do now that you're going through this divorce? How does that affect your sale or your purchase? So that's what we're going to talk about today and learn more on. Um, so, Matt, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about how you help those going through a divorce and your goals first before we get into some questions.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Tanya. This is great that you do know. So keep up the great work. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about how long you've been working with um, divorced owners, sellers, and how you've been able to help them through the process.
Yeah, of course. So my title would be mortgage loan officer. So we help on help financing on purchases and refinances in any situation. And then about 12 years ago, I met two ladies that they started a program, and what it was designed to do is to train realtors at that point on how to best advise clients that are going through a divorce when they're involved. And so I've been involved with that for years. And then in the last year, they actually started a training program for lenders to teach us how to serve people that are in that difficult situation at a higher level. So how to best involve situations where it doesn't go well. And I've got some stories that I can share with people just to show how you need a professional such as yourself or myself on your side as you're going through this, just to make sure that it's a difficult situation at that. And then if the real estate division does not go well, it can make a difficult situation horrible. So we've been trained on how to make this as a difficult situation as good as possible.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. Um, I purchased, this is just an example we want to give. You'll have a buyer that comes to you
Yep.
who has, let's say, an owner, someone who has owned a property. They bought it before they were married. And now they are looking to refinance because now interest rates are low. So, hey, I want to refinance this property I bought prior to being married. I'm the only one that owned it. I'm the only one on the deed. Now that I'm going to refinance it, does that mean now my spouse has to be on that deed with me, refinance it with me, or can I just go ahead and refinance this on my own? What happens now that I'm refinancing this property?
Yep. So in the state of Tennessee, when you sign your mortgage application, if you put married, they're going to want to get your spouse involved. Your spouse doesn't have to be on the loan. They don't have to sign all the documents that you would sign as the owner, but they will have to sign some marital documents, and they are going to basically, it shows that your spouse knows what you're doing. There are situations where spouses try to pull cash out of a property and the other spouse doesn't know. So this is a situation where anytime, even if you owned it before, in the state of Tennessee, it's implied marital property rights. So if you're married, that means your spouse is going to have to sign if you're refinancing or if you are selling.
So that means they go on the deed, but they don't necessarily have to be on the refinance. They don't have their credit or their they don't necessarily have to refinance it in their name with me. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yep. They don't have to be on the loan. They don't have to. They just have to be on the document showing that you're married, since you're married, and they're actually showing they know what's going on.
Okay. So let's do another scenario. I just recently got married. I want to purchase a home. My husband or my wife, or whoever's buying, the other spouse, their credit is not the best. So the home is still going to just be in my name, even though we are married. Do I have to put my spouse on my deed if I'm buying property? Can I buy it in my name, or if I'm buying it cash, do I have to have someone on that? Do I have to have my spouse on that deed with me? How does that work when I'm buying property and married?
So there is, in the state of Tennessee, there is a waiver on purchases. So you can actually buy a home in the state of Tennessee without your spouse signing, even if you are married. So you do not have to have them. So that's in the divorce situation. If people are splitting, going different directions, and your divorce isn't final yet, you can go ahead and buy a house without the other person signing anything in Tennessee.
Now, what happens if something happens to me, and I know we're talking about divorce, but I bought it, it's in my name, but then they're not on the deed, and I passed away in death. Now what happens?
Yeah, so they would be considered an owner just based on the marital property rights. So that would transfer over to your spouse. But if they're not actually on the paperwork, I've seen situations where it may take the process longer, because if you're on the deed together with the right of survivorship, if one of you pass, it automatically goes over to the other spouse. If you're not on the documents for the home, then you would have to go through more of the court process to be able to show that you are the other owner. So it definitely makes sense if you're going to stay together and to have both people on. I'm sure you have really good title companies that you work with. That's an added service you could have to your clients, where you'd say, hey, I have my title company. I know that your spouse bought the home before we were married. Just a quick one document, it might cost $20, called a quit claim deed, would actually allow the new spouse to be added on there and could make things a little easier if one of them happened to pass away.
Okay. And so I own this home. It's only in my name. Yep. Now I'm ready to sell. I'm ready to sell. So now that I'm selling this property, if I'm the only one on there, does my spouse have to know that I'm selling, or is that money mine? How does that work in the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, so if you are married, your spouse would have to acknowledge that you're selling the property.
Now, what if I don't tell my realtor or tell anyone that I'm married?
Yeah, good question. So they would do a title search. If nothing shows up, you may be able to get by with it. But that's one of all the documents they ask, are you married or single?
They do.
So that would be a challenge that they would try to figure out. I guess the bigger thing would be, at some point it would probably come out, and if you knowingly signed something or stated something incorrectly on purpose, that could lead you down a path you probably don't want to go on.
Right. I know in the past, I know when I go to closings, the title company asks that seller if they're married. And I'm not going to say if I've had anyone say that they were not when they were, but yes. If you know that your client is married, make sure that the title company knows, so the title company can do what they need to do, because that other spouse can come back and sue everybody, right? Because,
sure. Yeah, exactly.
It was like an illegal sale. In the state of Tennessee, if we bought something during this marriage, the spouse gets half. So definitely, especially if you're a real estate professional, title professional, if you know it needs to be disclosed, that way, say the other spouse wants nothing to do with it and doesn't care, they can, again, like you brought up earlier, quit claim that to you, or sign off something that says, hey, I don't have any rights on the property. I'm not asking for anything. But otherwise, that check needs to have two names. So
yeah, because if you have one party, and then, you know, if you tried to do something without somebody knowing, and then the other party finds out later, they do a whole discovery phase. They're gonna, if it gets really contentious and they have a good attorney, they're gonna do a lot of discovery, and they find you did something, and then you are signing legal documents stating that here's all my assets, here's everything I have, and then you're falsifying things. You know, that has farther ramifications than just getting a divorce. You know, there's other issues you have to deal with, which, you know, life's already bad enough if you're getting a divorce. You don't want to deal with legal issues, so that wouldn't be worth it.
Absolutely. And I know that I've had a situation too where, and this goes back to when you are going through a divorce, the courts can make some decisions too as to that property. So I had where I was selling a client's home, and it wound up becoming a court case. The court wound up making a decision on who would sell the house, and they wind up selling the house. So that listing got taken away from me. Someone that the court assigned sold that house. And my client wasn't happy, of course, because it wasn't what they were looking to get. It was less than what they were looking to get, and they didn't, you know. But the court can assign a realtor to sell your house as well if there are some issues with getting one spouse out of the property, or selling the property, or not being able to get it sold, or not being able to agree on the sale and things like that. That can happen as well. And I know, Matt, you said you have some stories too. So tell some of the stories that you went through with working with clients going through a divorce, or some horror stories per se that you have.
Yeah. So you know, there's definitely unique situations come up that unique situations always come up in real estate. I'm sure Latanya has more stories than we have time today, just about regular real estate situations, from animals in the crawl space to people trying to hide issues with houses that are falling down, with, you know, shoddy construction, to people lying about their jobs and income and credit. There's all kinds of stuff just in regular real estate. It seems to be amplified. The stories are amplified if it's divorce real estate, because everyone's trying to get an angle on the other one, it seems like. And there was a situation in Franklin where the husband and wife were splitting. So one, as you could guess, if they're splitting, you know, that means things aren't going very well. One of them was involved with a business. That's all the wife knew. She thought she was getting $200,000 in equity. The husband thought he was getting $200,000 in a portfolio. So they each sign all the papers. They move on. The wife she had like 6 months to do a refinance on the house. So they both went their separate ways. She takes her time. She had other stuff going on. Close to the 6-month mark, she applies for a refinance. The title work comes back on the property. She thought she had $200,000 in equity. She found out her home had a $217,000 federal income tax lien attached to the property. So what that means is the husband has a $200,000 portfolio. The wife is now negative $17,000 in equity on her house, because that lien doesn't go with the person, it goes with the land. So she has to try to figure out a legal recourse to be able to get back at the husband, because he basically out-negotiated her in the situation. So she's stuck with the house with the lien on it. He's already moved on. So the
suggestion in that case. So typically, if I'm listing a property, what I like to do is go ahead and let the title company, prior to listing, go ahead and, you know, let me know if the title is clear as soon as possible, so you won't have these issues. But especially too, if it's heir property or something like that, we like to know who all is involved that we need to get in contact with.
Yeah, you are correct.
What would be your suggestion for her to know sooner? What do you think would have worked?
Yeah, so one of the things that we are trained in to be a specialist in divorce real estate is the clients and the parties involved need more information, and they need that information earlier. So the two things we've when the attorneys are working through the situation with these houses, there are a couple things that sometimes can affect the value of a home. We found that the value of the home is just not what the appraisal says. There's two things listed on the appraisal that actually affects that. One is what the appraiser said, but the other two things are, one is a clear and marketable title affect the value of the home. The second thing that affects the value of the home is not just the appraisal, but it's the condition of the home. And there's several places that the appraiser doesn't check. They don't go up in the attic. Usually they don't go in the crawl space. They don't go underneath the house. The appraiser has a limited scope of what he does for the house. So the two things that can really, really help a homeowner, one that you just mentioned, that if they are going through a divorce, thinking about a divorce, they should look for a professional like you or myself that has a trusted title attorney that will allow them to do a title search for free or for minimal costs. That way, that would take that issue off the table, because within a few days, that lady would have known that there was a $217,000 tax lien on her house, and she could have said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Negotiations are off until you fix this."
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's one part of the information. The second thing is well, I'll ask you this, LaTanya. Would you ever have a client? Would you advise a client to buy a home without a home inspection?
No, I do not.
Not at all, right? Because they haven't been.
I tell them to get a home inspection for their protection. Absolutely.
Exactly. So they haven't been underneath the house. They haven't been on the roof. They haven't seen the house before because they've never lived there, right? But think about this. Tell me the last time, the home that you live in, LaTanya, tell me the last time you were on the roof, the last time you were underneath the house on your own house.
It's been a while.
So what percentage of Americans even know what to look at, let alone have been underneath? So let's just say you're getting a divorce, you live in a home for 20 years, and you think that you know everything about it, so you don't even think about it. But basically, in a divorce situation, if you're keeping the home, one spouse is quote unquote buying the home from the other spouse. They're going to be stuck with the good, the bad, and the ugly. So most people haven't been on the roof or underneath it. So, that's the second factor with the value of the home is the condition of the property. And time after time, one of the spouses sign a piece of paper saying this home is mine, and they don't even know if there's issues going on with it. They think there's not because they live there. But you and I both know that if you lived in a home long enough, there could be issues just right below the surface that you don't know until the home inspector looks. So that's the second thing, as far as more information earlier, would be before anyone agrees to keep a home in a divorce or buy a home or anything, especially in divorce situation, they should get with me or you and get a trusted home inspector that would do a top to bottom search. Because if you think you have $200,000 in equity based on the appraisal, but you find out there's $50,000 worth of work that needs to be done, that's not $200,000. That's $150,000. Does that make sense?
Yes. Another thing I was thinking about, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say another thing I was thinking about is if you're wind up getting the home due to the divorce, but it's in both names. It is in both names, and you want your spouse who it's in both names. Because I'm trying to think of the situation that happened, but basically my client that needed wanted to sell, who wound up getting the house, but wanted to buy something else, was not able to because of credit things. So even you need to look at that part of your credit. Because if both of you were on the loan and whoever was paying the mortgage per se has a lot of late fees that mortgage was still in both names. So those late fees are still attached to that mortgage. So it's hard to get another mortgage. Talk about that. bit about credit and things like that when you're trying to sell and maybe get another one to get out of a house.
Yeah, good point. So when we get involved in these type of situations and cases, we have two goals. One is to help the client protect their credit, and then our second goal is to help them protect their home ownership eligibility. Doesn't mean they're going to buy a house immediately, but we'd hate for this process to ruin their credit and ruin their chances if that's something that they want to do in the future. So we really dig into that at the beginning, because what happens if we get involved late in the process, your scenario you just gave happens quite a bit. So there's one spouse that's in charge of paying the bills. There's another spouse that either maybe they make the money, maybe they don't, but they don't even know the name of the mortgage company, let alone how to pay it. And if it gets heated, that is one way that some people get back at the other one, is to miss the payments on purpose. I know it sounds terrible. It's taking their credit, but we see it quite often. So what we do when we get involved is try to get all the chips on the table where everyone knows what's going on, and try to alleviate the unknown from one of the parties to be able to share with them, get everybody on the same page that the payments are going to be made. That way, at least when people, it's terrible, LaTanya, when a relationship breaks. It's also even worse when relationship breaks and you have bad credit and you're broke and you're fixing tax liens 2 years later. So, people think that, gosh, if I can just get out of this relationship, I'm going to have a clean break. Well, it can take 7 years for things to come off your credit. So unfortunately, if the divorce smashes your credit, you want to buy a car, you want to buy a house, for the next 6 or 7 years, you could still be thinking about that person you thought was out of your life, because each time you're going to be blaming them for it because they're the one that smashed your credit. Does that make sense? So if you get it on the, so if we get involved early in the process, we go through and we get the mortgage statements, we get all the bills, we get all their documentation, we help the attorney put together all the documents for their case file, and then we get everything on the table on the front side. We coach people on their credit. We coach them on protecting their home ownership eligibility. It doesn't work all the time just because people are people, but we found that if we're more upfront at the beginning, everybody knows what's in it for them. They know they're not just hurting the other person, they're hurting themselves. They seem to play a little nicer together. And then we go through and just make sure that if everyone knows about the bills, they can each, if everyone has access to all the online mortgage payments and billing, they can check on each other from the beginning. It doesn't get off the rails. It's when people are hiding things and doing things, backstabbing and getting people back is when it gets really bad. So the main thing would just be everyone knows what's going on and don't miss any payments, because the credit could already be bad, because the number one cause of divorce is financial issues, and you've got infidelity and those type of things. But there's a decent chance it's already not going that well financially. So they need to get on the same page as they go through this process, or it's just going to get worse.
Mm-hmm. Quick question. So if someone does get behind on their mortgage and they, how long, say they get behind on their mortgage and they want to, and we're talking about selling the home, sell the home and buy another one. How long is it? 12 months do they have to wait? How long do they have to have on-time payments in order to make that next purchase?
Yeah, good question. So that's a good rule of thumb, 12 months of no late payments. It's usually hard to get approved earlier than that. And, I always try to, I know it's always, you've got people that have money, they have down payments, and they'll come to me and they'll say, gosh, well, I've got a down payment, I've got this, I've got a good job, why can't I get a mortgage? And the easiest way to look at it is if you kind of turned and sat on the different other side of the table, like where an underwriter or a company would. If you're buying a $200,000 house and you're only putting $7,000 down, say an FHA with 3.5%, that company is giving you $193,000. You've got $7 on the line, they've got $193,000, and they see that you have in the last 6 months couldn't pay the mortgage to the other company, you were behind. If you were the one with $193,000 on the line, you would probably pause as well and say, hey, I'd like to see them catch up. I'd like to see them make a few more payments before I put the $193,000 on the line if it was your money. And then most people usually get it at that point. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They're giving me that much money. I need to prove that I can at least make 12 payments in a row.
Right. Right. And one thing you said too was that it won't fall off for 7 years. Here's the thing about credit. Yeah, it may fall off after 7 years, but you don't have to wait that long to make it fall off. So things can be removed from your credit. So it doesn't mean that you have to wait 7 years to get some things to fall off and for your credit to improve. You can do things to improve your credit and get those negative items removed. Just wanted to throw that out there and let you know, because I've known people who waited for 7 years and things didn't fall off. So they waited for 8 years and things were still sitting on there. So you can get things removed then, or you can go ahead and get them removed now so that you're in a better position. But definitely, if you are thinking about selling your home or moving or getting another one, or even keeping the one you got and thinking about refinancing due to what's going on, look at your financial situation, look at what's going on so you can prepare yourself to do the things that you want to do to put yourself in a better situation. But yeah, divorce can have a adverse effect, or it may make everything right, but you definitely want to make sure that you financially look out and make sure that the situation that you're putting yourself in is financially feasible, credit wise, like we just talked about, and make sure, again, we talked about liens on the property, the condition of the property, and things like that as well. Any additional advice or information that you want to give, Matt?
Yeah, I think you did talk about one that we definitely want to hit, is that sometimes you can negotiate things in a divorce situation just because they look equitable. They seem to balance out when you look at the scale, but they don't balance out if you can't actually do that, meaning that you agree, I'm going to give the spouse a certain amount of money when the home sells. Well, you just don't know exactly what you're going to net at the end of it, because a lot of times the document used to figure out that number can be a mortgage statement that's recent, but that doesn't actually have, if things aren't going well, there could be late payments, there could be interest added on there. So you'd actually need to go through a couple more steps and get a payoff statement. We've seen that happen before, where they kind of come up with their net number off of the mortgage statement. They don't do a payoff. So that way their numbers can be way far off if they're behind on their payments. So that would be one thing. The second thing would be, if you're really want to own a home after the divorce, and you already own a home, it wouldn't make sense to get rid of a home if you can't buy another one. So a lot of times we'll have a spouse that'll agree, hey, I'm going to sell this one and buy another one. And then they don't talk to myself till they've already negotiated that. They've already agreed to sell the home. And then unfortunately we have to give them the bad news that they don't actually qualify for another house. And they were perfectly fine with the home they were living in. They would have kept that one, but they just wanted to move on from it.
Right.
So the other thing would be, to make sure that we get involved and pre-qualify you before you sign a legal binding document to do something. You want to know what your options are, and we can do that in a short period of time, have you pre-qualified and say, yes, you can buy another home at this level, or no, you can't. You probably ought to keep the one that you have if you want to own a home.
Right. Right. You touched on something that I was going to bring out. Oh, what I was going to say, one story that I didn't mention was I did have a client that went through a divorce, and the spouse went ahead and bought them another house already had them another house, so they were already in the right financial situation. So again, some of these issues that we discussed came up after the fact of the client getting ready to sell their house. So definitely there's some great information that was shared today that you do want to think about if you want to sell your house during a divorce, if you want to buy a home and you're separated or married still, just some of the legalities and who owns ownership. Of course, like we mentioned, in the state of Tennessee, if you buy or purchase something during the marriage, you both own it when you get ready to sell it, even though it may be in one person's name. So great information, Matt. I appreciate everything. So if any of you have some questions about, again, buying or selling during a divorce, or real estate questions, title questions, I can put you in touch with a title attorney, or as Matt mentioned, he's full of knowledge as well. We'll love to help you. So DM or inbox us, as well as subscribe to my YouTube channel that is in the comments above. Thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to talking to you next time on Buying and Selling Nashville. Have a great day. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.